Hi there, this is Erica Marilyn. I am the founder of Perfect Legal Video, and I am excited, as always, to have with us today attorney Nicole Reeves Lavallee. She owns a family law firm out of Worcester, and she is going to be talking to us about a very interesting topic today, one that you may not think about initially when you're going through a divorce: grandparents' rights. Welcome to the show today, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's one of those topics that I get a lot of questions about, and people don't know what their rights are and they don't know what the ramifications are. So hopefully we can get a little educated today.
That's great. So if I am a grandparent and my son or daughter is going through a divorce, do I get to see my grandkids?
Simple answer is it depends. So obviously if mom or dad want you to see the children, then obviously you can see the grandkids whenever they so designate. So grandparents' rights really only come into play when both parents are saying no.
So what if one parent wanted me to see the child, but the other didn't?
Well, say for example that you're the mother and it is your parents, then obviously it's going to create a problem. If your parents are saying no, or if mom is saying no, you can't see my kids, then that's not going to happen unless dad allows it during his parenting time. Now, if it's the other side around where you're the mother and it's the father's parents that want to see them, then again it goes back to, is the father willing to do that? So it kind of depends on who's unwilling to allow you to see your grandkids and what their position is and what is their relationship to you.
Well, before we move on to the obvious next question, I just wanted to ask you a quick question about what if you are going through a divorce and every time your spouse, or soon to be ex-spouse or ex-spouse, gets your children, they just drop them off at the grandparents, and that's how they use their parenting time?
Well, there's a lot of debate on that one too. A simple answer is it's during that person's parenting time, so that parent can do what he or she wants with his children during his or her parenting time. So if he wants to drop them off at his parents' house, so be it. The real issue comes into play as to whether or not he should have as much parenting time as he does have as a result of him not actually taking care of the child. So it really depends on the circumstances, but nobody's going to stop the grandparents from having this free time, if you will, because that's what one of the parents has so designated.
Well, that's good to know. So they'll assess that later on and see, how the other parent is using their parenting time. So that's nice to know that they do that. What if, for some reason, both of the parents do not like the grandparent, and for whatever reason do not want the grandparent to see the grandkids?
And that's when the grandparents' rights come into play. The funny thing is we call it grandparents' rights. It's a complaint for grandparents' visitation. However, let me be clear, grandparents don't necessarily have any rights. So it's one of those things that you really are at the mercy of the parents and the mercy of the court. You have a very high standard to be able to prove to the court that you are entitled to some type of grandparents' visitation. But again, it's a high standard because parents have a constitutional right to raise their children as they deem necessary. And if they say that you are not a good grandparent and they do not want you around their child, then they have the right to do that. So you have a burden to overcome in order to show the court that yes, you should be having some kind of grandparents visitation.
So what is the requirement by the court?
So first off, you're going to have to file a complaint for grandparents visitation. in that, it is called a verified affidavit. And basically, a verified affidavit is just essentially stating and setting forth very detailed statements as to why you believe that you're entitled to it. The burden is on the grandparents to state why. They also have to show that how it was going to be a detriment to the child if the grandparents' rights are not awarded. So, for example, if you're a glorified babysitter and you have been for the last 5 years, and maybe you take your grandkids on a vacation once a year, maybe with or without the parents, that doesn't mean you're entitled to grandparents' rights. We really have to show that, look, this child has been living with me in my home, maybe with the parents, maybe not without the parents, but they've been living with me. I've been doing everything for this child. I've been raising this child. I was basically a de facto parent, and to take me out of this child's life at this stage is going to be absolutely detrimental to the child and the child's well-being and their best interests. So we need to have that extreme level of care, because originally we gave grandparents lots of rights, and then case law came down and said, we're going to strip it down and we're going to make it extremely difficult, because again, going back to that constitutional rights of the parents.
Wow. And you can imagine that if they are good grandparents and all of this is going on and all of a sudden they can't see the grandkids, their hearts must be aching. And it makes me very sad to even think about that. Or anytime a kid doesn't get to have the relationship with a family member because something that was not their fault or even the grandparents' fault, it's very sad. So how long does the process typically take?
It really depends on how much everyone wants to argue, but realistically, you should be planning on going to a trial. Most grandparents' rights cases do not settle. They really take it to the very end. So it is something that you should be looking at, probably 15 months to 2 year mark, if not longer, depending on the circumstances and what exactly is happening.
So while this whole 1.5 to 2 year period of time is happening, is there a process to where the grandparents get to see the grandkids?
Most likely not. And it's one of those things that is very difficult, because it's harder to prove that there is such a detriment to this child, and this has been going on for 2 years. And of course, the parents are going to go, see how wonderful this child is doing without you in your life. And so it makes it harder for the grandparents to really prove that. You really got to show something else that's going on. So it does make it very difficult. And unfortunately, you are at the mercy of the parents again to essentially, to a certain degree, beg for any kind of visitation, because you're not going to be court ordered to do it on a temporary basis.
So if you do get everything settled, what kind of schedule can you expect?
Really depends on where the parents are emotionally and mentally. A lot of times you're not going to get more than what a non-custodial parent would get. So maybe if you're lucky, you're going to get an every other weekend scenario. You'll get some holidays, not all of them. You'll probably get 2 or 3 hours, but it's not going to be on the holiday itself. It'll be, December 26th or something to that effect. So you'll get some of that stuff. Maybe you'll get a week vacation of time in the summer. Maybe you'll get part of April, February break. But a lot of times people go in with the expectation that I'm going to get every other weekend and a dinner visit, and I'm going to get 2 or 3 weeks in the summer. You're not a parent. And unfortunately, as hard as that is to be heard, you need to understand that. You're not the parent. You don't get all those rights. You should be happy to get what you can get, and you should, work your best to resolve the issues with your son or daughter to see if you can get that relationship amicably without having to go through the courts or getting a court order.
Wow. Do you have a lot of cases like this?
I have quite a few. Like I said, it's when they come in, grandparents are very adamant, and they're very determined. And the facts of the case really depend on what's going on. I mean, I had one case where unfortunately mother had passed away. So the only thing we had to deal with was the father. Well, the father subsequently married, and the stepmother was, to say the least, a nightmare. She was dictating everything, she was controlling everything, and unfortunately, the circumstances are a little different in a situation where a parent has passed away. Grandparents have a little bit more rights in that circumstance. But my client was able to show that she did have this very bonded relationship with this child, that it was going to be detrimental. And thankfully, unfortunately, stepmom screwed up, which worked to our advantage. And the father finally realized that my client wasn't the enemy, that she just wanted to be involved in this child's life because unfortunately, that was the only thing that reminded her of her daughter that she had lost. So it can get very emotional when you have circumstances like that. You know, I have another case where it involves a gentleman that is in the military, and so the grandparents of the father is looking for grandparents' rights. And, you know, again, those rights belong with dad, and we're willing to give dad rights during dad's parenting time, and then the grandparents can have it during that time. But the grandparents keep saying, well, he's deployed more often than not, so give me more time. So, you know, you have battles that are similar in that nature, that it's very difficult. And then you have other grandparents that, again, they were just a babysitter. And I have to tell them that, unfortunately, my best solution is to see if you can get the other parties to come to a mediation. If they can come to a mediation and if they can resolve it there, that's your best avenue. Because once you try to file that legal action, you're going to lose in those circumstances. And then guess what? You are not going to see that grandchild for a really long time, if at all, because then the animosity level goes up. So it really kind of depends on your circumstances as to whether or not you really want to fuel that fire, because that's exactly what it does.
Wow. I mean, thank God your clients have you, because that emotional roller coaster and losing something that is so near and dear to your heart, such as a child or a grandchild or whatever the case may be in some of these family matters, it takes it so that you really can't see anything but red, I'm sure. And so, one of the things I love about you is that, and I know your clients all love it too, is that you are just level-headed, very clear in your strategy. You don't miss anything, and you're not afraid to ask the hard questions. And it's not about being out to get the other person. It's about doing what's fair and what, most importantly, is right for the child. And so, I would recommend anyone in the Massachusetts area that has a question on any family matters to definitely give Nicole and her team a call, because they can give you a clear and concise plan of action and make sure that you're taken care of, and that you're not messing your case up, number one, and that you're getting the best possible outcome for everyone.
Absolutely. I think that one thing that I do want to add is that grandparents' rights only come into play if the parties are legally separated or divorced or going through that. If they're not, and they're an intact family, then grandparents have absolutely zero rights, and there's nothing that they can do. Again, they have to go back to begging and trying a mediation or something of that nature, because the rights don't even come into play in any form unless you have that division of a family unit.
Wow. Well, I want to thank you so much for giving us this information on this really tough topic this week. But there's also positives. I mean, the positive outcome is that you get to spend time with your grandkids if you play your cards right. And I think sometimes the advice you give is to just be quiet and take your lumps and try to see the kids as much as possible, the grandkids as much as possible, but don't agitate the situation.
Sometimes the legal system is not going to work to your benefit. And if you know that in advance, then at least you can kind of angle it in a way that's going to be best for you in your situation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, Nicole. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I know the audience really enjoys the information that you give out. It's incredibly helpful, and we appreciate it. And thanks so much to the viewers for watching.